Hey everybody, this is Brian with Bear Cards 34. Today's video is entitled What's in a Name? And I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about the name of my channel, the name of my favorite sports team, the name of my favorite football player, and the person I was named after as well. Okay, so as sacrilegious as this is, I'm going to cover up the Chicago Bears logo with a Green Bay Packer. There it is. This is my only Jordy Nelson numbered card. This is numbered 22 out of 99. But as anyone who follows sports card, or at least football card videos on YouTube, you are familiar with Packer Cards 87. And so I had been away from collecting for a long time, and I got back into the hobby, and I was purchasing some cards. I wasn't doing it as much as I am now, but I was definitely getting back into the hobby. And then I came across his channel a couple years later and really loved his videos. I would watch every video he put out. I still do. I love his videos. And his name is Brian, just like me. And although he was a Green Bay Packer fan, he had these awesome videos, and he seemed to really love the hobby and get really excited with his rips and his hits, and I loved it. So I would kind of live vicariously through him as far as the football hobby was concerned, because he was, and still does, purchase things that are much more expensive than I can afford these days. But anyway, I love his channel, and I decided to make my own channel, mostly just because none of my friends and family, other than a little bit my brother, collects sports cards anymore. When I was a kid, everybody did. That was the 90s junk wax era, big boom. And so I decided to create my own channel to interact with other collectors and just to kind of show my stuff and see other people's stuff. And it's been great. It's everything I hoped it would be. And anyway, I didn't think very hard about it, but I just decided, I'm going to name my channel as a kind of a nod to Packer Cards 87. And so, obviously, as a Chicago Bears fan, Chicago Bears, so Bears Cards 34. Now, my channel is Bear Cards 34, and I went back and forth on that. Should it be Bears Cards 34? Should it be Bear Card 34? Ultimately, because Brian had chosen Packer Cards 87 instead of Packers Cards 87, I went with Bear Cards 34. And of course, the 34 being for, okay, this is going to feel a lot better now. Let's get him. Oh, there we go. That would be for Walter Payton. Number 34. And so, thus, Bear Cards 34. Now, if I could go back and really think it through, I'll admit I probably would have named my channel something else, just to be more original. I really didn't know when I made the channel if I'd have 2 subscribers or 52 subscribers or whatever, right? And so my channel is a very small one, even today, a year later. But it definitely has been great. Subscribers and views are nice and all, but honestly, I am loving and very content with where my channel's at right now. I made some great friends in the hobby and had a chance to interact with a lot of great people. So if you're one of the people who was watching this, thank you very much. I know sometimes my videos can be a little long. I love not just the cards. To me, they're not just a graph on an investment chart. They're something that is a part of what I love, which is football. I love the sport. I played the sport for many years growing up. I love the players, the teams, the history, and so I like to kind of delve into it a little bit. That doesn't mean I don't like a good rip as well, because obviously I do. But yeah, so I appreciate you guys being here with me. So that leads me then into the next part of this, which, oh, by the way, I will tell you this. I had been mentioning that I was going to make this video, and I told my wife about the Bear Cards 34 and what would I have called it, and she thought what I should call it was Sports Cards Are Expensive, and that got me laughing. It's very true, especially these days. But you can definitely make it work, depending on what you're collecting and how you're collecting. There's a little something for everybody if you look for it. So now I'm going to talk about names, and like, for example, right here, my guy William Perry. When most of us who know who William Perry is think of him, something comes to mind, and that would be his nickname, the refrigerator or the fridge. So again, these names have a story behind them. And so just like Packer Cards 87, Bear Cards 34, William the Refrigerator Perry. That leads me into my guy right here, Walter Payton. And so if you, this Upper Deck card kind of highlights it a little bit right here from his 1975 card. Sweetness, that is his nickname. So Walter Payton is one of the greatest football players of all time. In 1977, he was the NFL's MVP. He was also the 1977 Man of the Year, and that award is now named after him. You guys will see that each year now. There's the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Great guy, 5-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time second-team All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler. He's a member of the 70s All-Decade Team, the 80s All-Decade Team. He's on the 100th anniversary all-time players of to ever play the game. Super Bowl 20 champ. His number 34 is retired by the Bears, and when he finished his career, he had almost 17,000 rushing yards. He had 4,500 receiving yards. He got the nickname Sweetness in college, actually. And when I did my research on the nickname itself, there are a handful of things that come up as to where the nickname was inspired by. One was his personality. Another one was just his athletic grace. You see his high step and some of the moves he would make, and it was sweet. Then another one is that it's a sarcastic description of his playing style because he was a really aggressive running back. He didn't like to go out of bounds. He liked to take a hit instead, or hit the guy, really. And in fact, his book and his motto was never die easy. On the back of the Upper Deck card, though, you'll see it actually mentions, it says that Walter Payton nicknamed Sweetness because of his smooth, high-stepping style of running. So, according to Upper Deck anyway, that's where we get that nickname. All right, next up for names, we've got the Chicago Bears. This is my team right here, obviously. Love these guys. So the Chicago Bears began in 1920. They were in Decatur, Illinois, not Chicago. And they were not called the Bears. They were actually the Decatur Staleys. And the Staleys was a food starch company. And the Decatur Staleys became one of the charter members of the NFL. And they moved to Chicago a year later and became the Chicago Staleys. But George Halas then ended up buying the rights to the team. He had been involved from the beginning, but he ended up purchasing the rights to the team from A.E. Staley for $100. I think that was, even back then, I'm sure that was a very, very good investment on Halas's part. So he then changed the name in 1922 to the Chicago Bears, and that was because in Chicago they had the Chicago Cubs. And this was kind of common for sports teams where you had football and baseball where the names would kind of be related to each other. And because of the Chicago Cubs, Halas thought, okay, Chicago Bears, which is a great name for a football team. And so Halas also liked the orange and blue colors from his alma mater, which was the University of Illinois. So he took those colors and then adopted those to the Chicago Bears. They did make the the shading of the colors darker, which I think is good for this team. And anyway, that was the start of the Chicago Bears. They have the most championships of any team, which is 9. Unfortunately, only one of those is a Super Bowl. They also have the most Hall of Fame members. They have the most retired jerseys. They have the most victories in NFL history. And part of that, obviously, is because they've been around longer than most other teams. And they were very, very successful in the early times. But nonetheless, that's definitely something for the Chicago Bears, and as a fan of the Bears, that's pretty nice to see, despite just the one Super Bowl victory. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, for those of you who are familiar with Terry from TJMAC Vintage Cards, he did a really good video the other day talking about the logos of teams and how they've changed, and I just wanted to show that with the Bears. Back in 1951 on this Bulldog Turner, you see the bear right here, and kind of an evolution here in 59 with the bear up on top of the football, and then the logo we know today right down here with the Chicago Bears. And that C logo, it's been around forever, but it's kind of cool to see the way Topps and Bowman would kind of have the Chicago Bear image, mascot logo, those kind of things. Definitely a good video from Terry, so check it out. I'll put a link to that in the description below. And for my final name of the video, I wanted to talk about my name, Brian. I was actually named after Chicago Bears running back Brian Piccolo. Now, top's totally messed up, and you'll notice here the first name B-R-Y-O-N, and then on the back B-R-Y-A-N. Neither of those are actually correct. His name is B-R-I-A-N. I was named after Brian Piccolo. They made a movie. Here's a kind of the, I don't know if I can get this in. Let's see, maybe I can put it back here. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's an awesome movie. It's old school, James Caan and Billy D. Williams, but it's based on Brian's life and his relationship and friendship with Gale Sayers. And definitely I'm biased, but a very good movie there. So basically, my parents were watching Brian's song while my mom was pregnant, and based on that movie, they decided they wanted to name me after Brian Piccolo. So I like to tell people I was a Chicago Bears fan from birth. And really that was true. I was always a Bears fan because I knew he played for the Bears and that I was named after him. And then that kind of coincided when I was very young with the 85 Bears, who were just awesome, you know. So it happened very naturally, and I've been a giant fan since. So with Brian Piccolo, he was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts back in 1943, and then the family moved to Florida when he was a kid. He went to college at Wake Forest, and as a senior, he led the nation in rushing and scoring, and he was also the ACC Player of the Year. But despite all of that, he still went undrafted, which is pretty crazy, really. You know, this card right here, my mom got for me when I was a teenager, and then this is a card that I picked up last year, PSA 8. So I'm really, really happy to have that as kind of an investment in the card, and then this one as an emotional investment because it means a lot to me. My mom had to really do a lot to track that down, and I was so happy I got that. So although Piccolo went undrafted, as crazy as that was, he did try out for the Chicago Bears as a free agent, and that year they had a young guy by the name of Gale Sayers. This is his second year card right there. He was the man, and he was the rookie, and he was the star. So Piccolo ended up making the team, but he was, as a rookie in 1966, he was on the taxi squad, or 65, sorry. In 65, he was on the taxi squad, which today we call the practice squad. So that meant he could practice with the team, but he did not play. A year later, he made the roster, but was mostly on special teams. And then by 67, he was Gale Sayers' primary backup running back. In 68, Gale Sayers had a really nasty injury, and Piccolo ended up having the best year of his career that year with 450 yards, a couple touchdowns, and then he also had 300 yards receiving. The year later, 69, when Sayers was back, they were in the starting backfield together with Brian Piccolo moving over to fullback. At that time, players were still segregated by race for hotel and room assignments, and Sayers and Piccolo became the first black and white player to share a room together. They became great friends and had a lot of good experiences together through that football relationship. And in the ninth game of his final year, 1969, Brian scored a 1-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter of that game, but then he took himself out of the game. He was having difficulty breathing, and for everyone who knew him, you know, he was not the kind of guy that would take himself out of a game, and so they knew something serious was going on. And when they got back to Chicago, he was seen by the medical doctors, and they determined that he had embryonal cell carcinoma. So he did pass away from cancer, unfortunately, in June of 1970. He was only 26 years old. He had a wife, Joy Piccolo, and 3 daughters. And it was a big loss to the family, to the community, and to the team. Gale Sayers and also this guy that you might have heard of, Dick Butkus, they were 2 of the 6 pallbearers of the Chicago Bears who were at the funeral who were pallbearers for Brian. Brian's number 41 was retired by the Chicago Bears. And like I mentioned, the film Brian song came out. There was also a book by Jeannie Morris called Brian Piccolo, A Short Season that I stole from my middle school library. I'll admit to that. Yeah, I did. I would say I accidentally stole it, to be honest. I just found it one day cleaning things out and thought, oh, that was about 4 years ago. So there you have it. Anyway, Brian Piccolo, kind of his legacy now. The ACC has a yearly Brian Piccolo Courage Award. And, I know 1 month after, or 1 month before Brian passed away, Gale Sayers was given the George S. Hallis Most Courageous Player Award. And that night, he dedicated that award to Brian and let people know that he would have it that night, and then it would be Brian Piccolo's the next day. And they play that scene out in the film as well. And one thing that's pretty cool is this card right here, this Chicago Bears team card. If you look closely, you can see Gale right here. George Hallis is on here. And then there's Brian right there, number 41. You got Gale down here. There's some great players in there. I think Mike Ditka's in there. Dick Butkus. You got some great players. Oh, look, Jim McMahon. No, not really. I think that is Bill Wade, though, if I got that right. Anyway, but I just wanted to kind of give a little nod to these different things. My channel name and where that came from, who I'm named after, the Chicago Bears, and the nickname of my favorite player, Walter Payton. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll be back with more videos in the future. If you like these kind of things, feel free to hit like and subscribe. And I'll be back with more videos in the near future. Everybody take care. Thanks so much.